Let's talk about the leaked Nintendo Switch 2 schematics and all sorts of details regarding what the Nintendo Switch 2 might look like. This is coming from a huge leak thanks to the system apparently going into mass production over in China. However, although there are various write-ups for this, no individual source is yet to be named, and it is very much breaking news. However, the amount of places going with it, talking about it, it's still obviously part of the conversation, so why not dive in? Like I said, various schematics, various renders have leaked for what is assumedly CAD designs. I forgot what CAD stands for, but it's what you feed a machine if it's going to make something for you, to put it in the most simplest terms I possibly can. Revealing a Nintendo Switch 2 with a slightly thicker form factor, magnetic Joy-Cons, a built-in microphone, 2 USB-C ports, and an 8-inch screen. And apparently the name is just going to be the Nintendo Switch 2. So not the Super Nintendo Switch.
Just straight Switch 2.
What are we doing?
I thought they would have shaken it up just
what are we doing?
By pure... Well, I suppose they did the Wii U, so the Switch 2 isn't completely miles away, I guess.
I mean, maybe they're looking back at gaming history and going, hey, PlayStation 2 was the highest selling console of all time, so let's just sequel the thing that is our biggest win in a long time.
And it makes sense, you know.
It makes sense.
It's for branding, it's probably much easier to sell what the Switch 2 is to, you know, parents who are buying this for their kids or whatever come Christmas or next Christmas, rather than the Super Switch. What did you say? It was
Super
good.
Nintendo Switch.
That's it. That's
the SNS.
cool. That's what we'll refer it.
I'm going
to as I cannot get my words out. The point is, Scott, yes. I need this now. I needed this yesterday. I need a Switch 2 to play every Switch game in glorious whatever resolution this is going to release in. The 8-inch screen sounds amazing. I have played a bit of your OLED Switch, which I am incredibly jealous of and wish I kind of upgraded to when it came out, because I think I would have got a bigger lifespan out of my original Switch model. Yeah, I think for me personally, as a more casual Nintendo fan, as a more casual Switch player, I do think new kit is needed. And I do think they're kind of releasing at the right time, because everyone is in, you know, arms are up in the air over PS5 Pro's pricing model. So if this can undercut it and give you, you know, literally an entirely new generation of Nintendo games, as well as, from all the leaks seem to point, you know, backwards compatibility or at least updated versions of original Switch games, that all sounds like music to my ears. And if it's priced accordingly, I will be getting one of these things day one. I like the look at these leaked visuals as well. It's a nice chunky boy.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all you need. The 8-inch screen is 1 inch bigger than the Switch OLED, so it's slightly bigger as well. A write-up from Metro.com notes that the Nintendo Switch 2 would be slower than the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X/S in terms of speed, but it will have more RAM capacity than the Xbox Series S, so it's somewhat comparable to the Steam Deck, which is a nice place to be. The Steam Deck runs things like Elden Ring, and the majority of new age games really, albeit on slightly lower settings, but obviously you're not going to a handheld to get things like ray tracing or whatever it is. There are ways to make it work. I think of the original Nintendo Switch as a bit of a miracle machine anyway. Like, one, because it lasted for so long. It's 7 years into its generation. And it's been largely keeping up kind of thing, at least in regards to releases, over the years, even though some stuff is abysmal to look at. But
again, no, sorry to interrupt. I suppose you're absolutely right, because, you know, the Switch coming in the fires of the Wii U, I know it wasn't necessarily a knee-jerk reaction, but for it to need to reclaim Nintendo's place as, like, you know, the place to game, after the Wii was just so bloody successful, and to take a lot of projects that started as Wii U games and either cross-release or move them entirely over to the Switch, like, that thing has been pulling heavy duty since it launched. It came in hot, and the fact, like you said, it's managed to continue impressing all these years later is in itself really impressive.
I think, like, we should talk about the price side of it, and then the general idea of, like, how powerful does a console need to be to matter in the modern day, when you've got the, you know, Sony doing the PS5 Pro, doing this extremely over-the-top system that has all the, like, AI upscaling, as they call it, PSSR stuff. The rumors for the Switch 2 is that it's going to have DLSS. These are just software-based ways of auto-upscaling games to make them run at higher resolutions, which was the rumor for the next Nintendo Switch, that would have some software-based way to get a game running in a higher resolution, whether that's 4K or whatever it is. But price-wise, they're arguably going up against something like the PS5 Pro for £700, $700, a regular PS5 being £500 or $500. I think the Switch 2 will be like $350 or $300. They might go $400. There's a little bit of Nintendo flirting with higher price points when Tears of the Kingdom was £70 or $70.
Yeah.
And they kind of know just how important this is, how big of a deal this is. Like, this is the most anticipated console release since, like, I don't even know, like I said, the Wii U, but even then that didn't really sell very well because they didn't market it very well. So it's not like the hype was there. At the time, back in the late, early 2000s, it was like, okay, the follow-up to the N64, then it was the GameCube. this doesn't need to do very much to dominate.
Yeah.
And I think Nintendo will be very aware of that. And there's something really funny about putting out, because the Nintendo Switch was a glorified mobile phone, like, in terms of the Tegra processor and everything. Like, if they just go really low on the specs and still dog walk the PS5 Pro for the next 7 years, and whatever Microsoft want to do with their weird streaming stuff and whatever, there's something really hilarious about Nintendo just doing it's almost like the Iron Man meme of like the box of scraps kind of meme. Like, this is potentially a box of scraps.
It's true. You know what? The thing is, right, that's all they need to do.
Yeah.
Like you said, I fully back that. This thing will sell if it's just incrementally better than the Switch, in opposition to it being massively better than the original Switch. As long as it's got the games to support it and it feels fresh and it has some new features and it's got that better screen and is outputting those games at a higher resolution, that will be enough for even myself. But selfishly, I want it to be powerful. I know it's not going to be as powerful as the next-gen consoles that we currently have, but I want it to feel like a bigger leap for me personally. Right. And that's only because while a lot of Nintendo games, I think we talked about this last week, while a lot of Nintendo games don't need that extra power, aren't really kind of coming out hot and feeling like they're compromised in any way, I do think, for me, as a person who only plays a couple Switch games a year, something like Tears of the Kingdom, I know I've banged on about it in many podcasts previously, but I do feel like that was one of the few games that did feel compromised a little bit. Like you said, it was almost a miracle that it was working on the original Switch. I still love that game, but I'm already tantalized by the possibility of seeing that running with better draw distances, better resolution, higher detail in the game world, because mechanically that thing is just so innovative and cool. And I want to see what else, those developers can do if they have access to that increased tech. Of course, we will still get our games that could run on a potato, but if that's balanced with some genuinely impressive visuals or gameplay ideas that weren't possible on the Switch, I do want to see that. However, that brings me back around to the question I want to propose to you. I've heard a lot about backwards compatibility with the Switch 2, that there is going to be some parity between the games being available on both systems. Do you think that's important, or do you want to see a more distinct generational shift where they just say, okay, no, a few games might cross over, but we're building at least these first-party games exclusively for the Switch 2?
The thing is, because it's Nintendo and because they never listen to anybody and they don't care about anything that anyone ever has asked for ever. They do not care.
It's true.
So I need them to respect the fact that everybody has bought entire catalogs of titles, but they nearly always do a half-step system backwards compatibility. So like the 3DS stuff worked on the new 3DS, or like a Game Boy Advance cartridge worked on the DS or whatever it is, and then it goes away the next system up. So assumedly, the Switch 2 would likely support the original Switch cartridges, so I guess you get physical backwards compatibility. But also, I have a wider worry about the way that they're approaching the legacy stuff, because on the Wii U, it was the Virtual Console. It was a much wider swath of titles, but they weren't given like the bells and whistles upgrades. And it's not like the ones on the Switch are given much more, but you can, like they have different save states and upscales and little things like that. But even then, they resold you it on a monthly subscription, and then they added, over time, over the generation, they added, like an executable that launches you into a Game Boy collection, a Game Boy Advance collection, N64, it's all separate things.
Yeah.
And so if you're them and you've done this twice over now, like, does that all reset again? And we have to like buy all the old, like, hey, it's Mario 64 again, or it's like, we're doing this stuff. I don't know. I'll do it because I love those games.
Don't do it again. Don't do it again.
To be fair, I've discovered emulation for the Steam Deck, so I don't know if I will. But Nintendo clamped down on that stuff so much, so you can't just get access to it.
You've got a Switch.
Yeah.
You've got an N64 with most of these games on anyway.
You're not wrong.
Do you not?
I do.
Do you need them again?
No, I know, but what if it's upscaled though, and it plays better? and it's like the better frame rates, and it's like, I don't know, we're in a weird era with old school emulations because Sony have finally caught up a little bit now, where they're doing PSP games, PS1 games with the upscaling, with the save states, and like with the rewinds and things like that. Stuff that should just be mod cons and things that are applied to old games. And Nintendo set the standard for that stuff. Like whether you want to go down the virtual console route or the per console stuff on the Switch, that's the stuff that I hope carries over. Because I think I hate that I know how they think, and it's just like pure business wise, you slice that all out and you make everybody pay for it again. Because if the proposition is how much do you care about Nintendo legacy and what you'll pay for it again, yes, people will, including me probably because we're stupid, including myself in that. So I that's the worry, is that they reset the whole thing.
Yeah.
I imagine it'll be backwards compatible with Switch cartridges or Switch downloads, but I don't think it'll be the all singing, all playing machine, because I think they need to remonetize the generation again. It sucks.
Nothing but just a scream
Nothing but
there.
pain.
That is, again, as someone who wants to like Nintendo and wants to play Nintendo consoles more than I do, it's stuff like that that keeps pushing me out when you get those kind of repeats of previous behavior and I don't want to say a disloyal, but a disregard for the investment, like you said, that you've already put into a console generation. And that is primarily when it comes to the legacy stuff. I know I'm someone who likes the idea of different generations and making games exclusive to certain consoles, but not when it comes to re-releases. Like if you get Mario 64, I think even if you have to pay like a fee for the slightly better version, like an extra $5 or something, it should be available. Like you shouldn't be locking off, in my opinion, those legacy games to specific platforms just to resell you them again later on the down the line for in my opinion, extravagant amount of money.
Well, this is the thing. This is the first console switchover where they've had a monthly fee. Like they got a monthly subscription service. Yeah. So, and across the Switch's lifetime, they unified the different Nintendo accounts. So you only have one Nintendo account now. It's not one on the consoles, one on the websites. Like they've, like I said, they unified all that stuff. So you would hope that means they carry it all forward, and then you just like all your purchases carry forward, and because they're all going to be attached to that account.
Yes.
But people thought that about the Virtual Console and couldn't believe that their purchases weren't honored when the Switch came out. So there is that. I mean, even the Switch's eShop, even the way the Switch works feels like this last minute cobbled together thing that like they never really did much with. And it was like proof of how much the wider bells and whistles don't matter. Like if you can just get a storefront to list some games with a transaction model in there, it'll work. Like the eShop store is so slow and laggy, and the more time you spend perusing it, the slower it gets. And they've not done anything with that in 8 years. And so, 7 years, sorry. It's interesting with all that stuff being like, do they undercut again? Because I don't really care. It's serviceable, it's functional. I'm not spending that much time on the eShop, but again, that's because it's terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm curious whether they just play to their strengths. I think in a wider sense, I wonder about this being the last generation for a lot of Nintendo's veterans, for the Shigeru Miyamotos and all the people who have been there since the beginning. Like there are reports out there about Miyamoto training his successor, and they got Doug Bowser in to like help steer the ship. Like he's the new Reggie Fils-Aimé, but like in terms of the face of Nintendo.
Yeah.
At the various press conferences and everything. But we're getting to a time where there's going to be a change of the guard. And I'm curious what that means. Like, is a lot of the awkwardness because of the old guard, or do they want to maintain that? Because it's not like their brand value has gone down.
No,
like it's stayed sky high. They're the only one of the three major companies who stay at like full price years and years and years. And it's like, well, that's just what they do. And it's just like that's terrible, but okay. And I think that's a really fascinating thing when you've got certain people in charge of the brand for since its inception, and they're about to leave the company.
You can get away with a lot if you're delivering what people want at a high quality, right? I think, like you mentioned there, myself included, and I'm not a huge Nintendo fan, as I keep repeating myself, but, as long as they keep pumping out, like, excellent games, and they do. They completely nail their main franchises at the very least, and then even then often serve up things that you didn't even know you wanted, that makes these consoles so special, makes these IPs so special, makes these gaming experiences so special to gamers of various generations, right? And as long as they are able to do that, they can offset a lot of the more egregious business moves that they have been making for decades at this point. But like you said, if those games start to drop, or if they start taking a more lackadaisical approach to game development, like they arguably do something like the store, does that then are they then public enemy number one? Do we become way more scrutinous? And how, they've achieved it this long, but how long can they keep the quality of the games that high? Realistically, like maybe forever. I hope forever, genuinely. I want the games to be amazing. And I do think they have a special sauce that needless console war BS that I'm going to engage in with now, but like that Microsoft doesn't when it comes to like their games and quality control. And I want that to be the norm across the board, but surely they can't keep that forever.
I don't know. I think it's interesting because it's like if you look at like if you're a Switch owner and you want a certain level of game, like from the first party, like I'm never expecting something on a AAA Naughty Dog or even Ubisoft level or whatever it is from Nintendo. I'm just not. And I think it's been fascinating across this generation, them letting other developers in more. Like there's a company called Grezzo that have helped with some of the Zelda games. There's Monolith Soft who made Mario Strikers, and they've been helping with other games as well. They've been hitting the Nintendo seal of quality, but you wouldn't know it. They still get marketed as Nintendo. But the little studios in there are these other teams that they've brought in and given more properties to and trusted with. And they've done that over the years, but not as much. And it's been interesting with that because I feel like Nintendo have been this guarded idea of what their games, what their IPs need to be and the quality that was associated with them. And they had weird relationships over the years in different ways, like when they tried to make the first Mario movie. And that movie went so horribly that they were like, we're never working with the West ever again. And that's kind of interesting. And then you've got the Mario Brothers, the new movie, and then the Zelda movie's getting made. And it's like, this is becoming a friendlier Nintendo in regards to the way that their IPs get talked about and worked on. But I don't think that gets fleshed out into a massive, like robust open world Mario game where he's driving around in a van and whatever.
No.
Like, I still think that you get simple, manageable video games that don't take the earth to complete. Like Nintendo's employees, it's a 98% retention rate. Like people do not leave Nintendo. Like they are happy. They're paid well. They get raises. It goes really, really well. Like I think that's what you maintain. That's what I want from Nintendo. I think Nintendo fans want that.
Yeah.
And I think there's ways to hit that. Sometimes it goes a little bit too under. I think I mentioned this on a different podcast or video. The Princess Peach game was really boring. Like that should have had way more to it. But I love that in the face of someone like Sony going like, hey, look, we're doing 4K 60 with the ray tracing and all the stuff. And then Nintendo's like, what if you stack like 4 beds to climb a cliff as Zelda? And then all of us go, that's the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
So they got to maintain that. I think that's the secret sauce.
I think you're right. And, I was being harsh earlier, Scott, but I think, these franchises at this point, while of course they have the creative leads, the people who have been heading them up often for decades at this point, like they have established, I think, a great sense of IP curation and cultivation. The people, everyone working on these franchises seems to really understand them, seems to really understand what players want, how they want to innovate. And like you said, sometimes that leads to a game that is a little bit too safe, but I suppose in their eyes, something being a little bit too safe is better than making another Bob Hoskins Mario movie, and maybe tarnishing the brand entirely, because you can always learn with the next game and maybe try to push the board out a little bit more and test the waters that way, because I do think you're absolutely right. Like, I don't think anyone goes to Nintendo for like the most cutting edge visuals or Naughty Dog level production or 200, 500 hour games or whatever it is. They come for the quality that Nintendo has always offered and even now kind of unwavering in when it comes to their game release.
The thing is as well, they just don't engage in the wider gaming discourse. Like the amount of disappointment that is in the conversation when you talk about different game launches, like on day one, or what console manufacturers are doing, or whatever it is. Nintendo, like I said, they don't care. They just stand to the side and go, we do what we do and we do it well. And you expect this level of game and we'll nail it. We're not giving you a broken product. Mario Wonder, they said internally that the developers were given as much time as they needed. And then you get a super inventive, really cool Mario game with a different kind of aesthetic. And it's like that they've weirdly won without even taking part. And it's like in the current climate, especially when Xbox and Sony are experimenting with live services and everything else, Nintendo just go, we're just going to make some platformers and like some simple stuff and it's going to work.
And that's the only thing that I worry about going forward, because I think, business-wide, even across the entire globe, we've seen things trend towards just trying to make as much money as possible. And Nintendo, of course, is in the business of maximizing profits.
Oh, yeah.
But I think not in the same way that we've seen other major publishers or console makers try to monetize their franchises, spin things off. So instead of making, a couple billion on selling 20 million copies of Spider-Man, you can make a couple of billion every 6 months by making a live service version of that franchise and just take your revenue to that next level. Like you said, and Nintendo seem to be pretty content where they are now. That's why I worry about the quality, because just looking at where business is trending overall, it is companies trying to reach that next level and often kind of going down in flames or making a lot of mistakes in the process or getting away from what people actually want, which is, like you said, just good games.
Yeah, and also like they don't come across as having the sort of endless growth chasing mentality that a lot of Western devs or Western studios or shareholders do. Not that you don't get angry Eastern shareholders as well, but like the general approach Nintendo has seems to be one of being comfortable, and they'll expand when they need to. There was a statistic years ago that they have, because they're such an old company, like 200 years old if you go all the way back to the card making games days. They have enough wealth to make a Wii U sized failure for like 200 years. Like
Wow.
they're completely fine. Like they're going to be okay taking their time with this stuff. We didn't really talk about the specs. We'll not talk about them too much. A couple things that stand out for me. Magnetic Joy-Con's awesome. The Joy-Con rails, even back on at day one in 2017, were very unreliable, weirdly too harsh to some people in terms of when they connect them. Mine have just started to fall apart now, where they don't realize the Joy-Con's connected. I've got to like wiggle it a bit. So magnetic might be cool for that. Built-in microphone, awesome. Something that a lot of people wanted back at the beginning. The fact that you had to use a mobile app for voice chat
Is that right?
is insane on the original Switch. You've got to use the companion app. So putting that in there was cool. 2 USB ports is awesome. Just general compatibility stuff. Overall, if this is all true, seems like a standard kind of step up, but I do think it's what everybody wants, especially in the current climate. And in the last part of this is that a Nintendo Direct is expected imminently. There's been one every September for like the last 6 years. So the theory is that we'll get one this month.
You know how the Xenomorph is like the perfect organism, Scott? I often think that the Switch is like the perfect console.
Yeah.
I don't know how you better that. I don't know how Nintendo themselves ever get away from the Switch style hybrid console, because it is so good.
Yeah.
I genuinely think it's a proper, it's one of my favorite innovations in gaming over the past couple of decades. Just that ability to blend handheld gaming with docked gaming and television console gaming as we know it. Like it's a perfect organism.
Also,
and I still love the original Switch, even if I think it's underpowered now. I mean, obviously at the time it was sensational. There's a reason why people still play that thing to death. There's a reason why it still sells. It's because it is so accessible. It is so catered to people's different gaming behaviors. And I don't know how you I don't think you could ever replicate that again unless you come up with the best idea in the world again. But just if all we get now, and again, this is someone who is maybe less imaginative when it comes to Nintendo, if all we got was different iterations of the Switches going forward, I'd be like, yeah, it's a winning formula.
I mean, that's the thing, because they've hybridized. They used to always have the handheld market and the home console market, and they hybridized the two. They haven't released a dedicated handheld apart from the Switch Lite. So this kind of is what they're doing going forward until they try and shake it up again. But yeah, until they say, do you want some more Mario? And we all go, nah, I'm all right. It's just going to keep rolling on and on and on because they're making a hell of a lot of money.